Every era of One Piece has characters that truly define that time, from Rox D. Zebek to Goldie Roger, Whitebeard, Dragon, Shanks, and even Luffy. Every era has powerhouses, characters that shaped the future and forced others to adapt. Some generations gave us emperors, whilst others gave us supernovas. But it isn't just pirates. Every generation has legendary marines within their ranks as well. Each generation boasts powerful fighters. But which generation is truly the strongest? Well, in this video, I will be giving my takes on each of the generations and rank them according to their strength, as well as an honorable mention towards the end of the video. Let's get started. Starting off this list is the current generation, mostly comprising of the worst generation, and anyone else who started their journey within the last 10 years. Now the worst generation is at the bottom of this list for a few reasons. Many of these characters are still reaching their primes. They still have a lot of potential, but they can't quite stack up to the previous generations. When we look at the heavy hitters of this generation, we have characters like Luffy, Blackbeard, Kid, Law, Zoro, and Sanji. If you want to be generous, you could also include Sabo and Yamato. Yes, these are some heavy hitters, but only 2 of them are actually at the Yonko level. And out of all of the characters we have seen in One Piece so far, it is clear that Luffy and Blackbeard are really strong, but also clear that they are not the strongest. At least, not yet. It was obvious that Kizaru was never trying his hardest to defeat Luffy on Egghead Island, and even went out of his way to help Luffy by bringing him food. And Blackbeard still had some trouble with Law, despite having 2 of the strongest fruits in existence. Some people may be scratching their head and wondering why Blackbeard is here. Yes, he has been a pirate for decades, but he only recently started his own pirate journey about 2 years ago. And he is considered a member of the worst generation, alongside Luffy and the other supernovas. The other characters like Zoro, Sanji, Law, Kid, Yamato, and Sabo, I would comfortably put them at the 1st Division Commander level. They will get stronger, yes, but for right now, this is where I would put them. And looking at the rest of this generation, it does not get any better. We have no real standouts within the Marines. Kobe is on the path to greatness, but he still has a lot of work to do to reach the level of his mentor, who we will talk about later in this video, and the other members of Sword are implied to be weaker than Kobe. So yeah, this is not a great look. Smoker lost to Doflamingo, who according to Kaido, is weaker than Jack. That means that unless Smoker got some insane power up off screen, he is nothing to write home about either. He looked great before Luffy had Haki, but ever since the time skip, he has become one of Oda's most reliable jobbers. Overall, this generation has the highest ceiling for growth, but for right now, they are at the bottom of my list. Next on this list are the characters that really began their journey about 20 years ago after the death of Goldie Roger. Now this list has some real heavy hitters. This list mostly comprises of the warlords who rose to prominence after Roger's execution, but it also comprises of monsters like Shanks and Mihawk, 2 characters that I would say are at, or at the very least near the Pirate King level. These 2 are absolute monsters. We saw what Shanks did to Eustace Kid, and Mihawk is stronger than Shanks.
Here we go again.
Yes guys, it's been 25 years. You have to accept it at some point. We have seen Shanks consistently shown as Oda's poster child for top tier hockey. And then we look at my GOAT, Dracul Mihawk, getting gloriously upscaled by every swordsman in the series. He has the strongest blade in the series, Yoru, and has fought against Shanks multiple times. Shanks, who is clearly one of the strongest characters in One Piece history. But what really takes this generation to the next level are the 3 admirals, 3 of the strongest characters in the entire series. And you could also include Green Bull and Fujitora. We saw that Kuzan holding back was able to scrap with Garp, and even out of his prime, Garp is no joke. He would have no-diffed Blackbeard's entire crew at Hachinoso Island if Kuzan was not there. On top of that, Kuzan was able to go toe-to-toe against the Kainu for 10 days straight, and their battle permanently changed the landscape of Punk Hazard. Then we look at Kizaru. People don't like to accept it, but he did not go all out against Luffy, and was heavily implied and pretty much outright stated by Oda himself to be the one who gave Luffy food on Egghead Island. Kizaru was able to go toe-to-toe against Rayleigh, not to mention, he has one of the most busted fruits in all of One Piece. But as the Fleet Admiral, Akainu was even stronger than both of them. And then we look at Green Bull and Fujitora, but in the case for Green Bull, do I even have to mention it? Shanks, who we will talk about soon, scared Green Bull off of Wano without even stepping foot onto Wano, with the greatest display of Wi-Fi hockey we have seen. And we can infer that Green Bull and Fujitora are relative to each other based on their fight. Green Bull was able to solo all of the Scabbards, and even beat King and Queen. It is also important to note that Kizaru was ready to go to Wano to face Kaido and Big Mom, and Green Bull was afraid to go to Wano, knowing that Kaido was there. So you could also speculate that Kizaru is stronger than Green Bull and Fujitora as well. Each of the admirals are above every 1st Division commander of a Yonko crew. You could argue that maybe might be admiral level, but time will tell with him. Going back to the Warlords, Doflamingo is pretty strong, and is arguably the most versatile devil fruit user we have seen in the series. From bird cages, string heart surgery, string clones, strings to fly off of clouds, parasitic strings to control people like puppets, yeah, he might be the most versatile devil fruit user we have seen. He gets downplayed a lot nowadays, but he still mops up 50% of the verse. Jimbei, Crocodile, and Hancock were each given bounties in the billions after the Warlord system was abolished. These bounties are comparable to most Yonko commanders we see today. I know bounties don't always equate to strength, but the Warlords would have to be at least this strong to be relevant at this point in the story. Kuma has an amazing devil fruit and is fairly strong in his own right. And speaking of Kuma, we have to talk about his longtime friend, Monkey D. Dragon. Now Dragon is a wild card. This man gets memed for looking east all the time, but let's not forget he is a member of the Monkey D family. Looking at what Garp could do well past his prime, and what Luffy is currently doing near the peak of his strength, it is very safe to assume that Monkey D. Dragon will be an absolute monster when he does fight, overall making this generation pretty stacked. Then we finally get to the golden era of piracy, the era that gave us many of the legends that we know and love today. Goldie Roger, Whitebeard, Garp, Sengoku, Shiki, Big Mom, Kaido, and now in the manga, Rox, Davy D. Zebek, and even King Harold. A lot of these characters reached their prime during this era, and their primes were different. Now for this section, we have to start with Goldie Roger for a few reasons. Roger, as we all know, became the first man to sail across the entire Grand Line, find the One Piece, and become the Pirates King. But Roger was also insanely strong. So strong in fact, that Kaido still remembers him as one of the strongest people he has ever met, even 20 years after Roger's death. As such, Roger is the benchmark that the other characters in this generation will be compared to. After the era of Rox, Roger was at the top of that era, with the only people who could compete with him being the world's strongest man, Edward Newgate, the future heads of the Marines, Garp and Sengoku. These are easily some of the strongest characters in One Piece history. Even when he was sick and dying, he was strong enough to fight against the world's strongest man for 3 days, wielding haki so powerful that Kaido still references Roger over 2 decades later. Then we get to his rivals, starting with Whitebeard, who, like I said earlier, had the title of the world's strongest man, and that title was not for show. Before even reaching his prime, he was Rox's right-hand man, and looking at the Rox pirates, being the right-hand man in that crew had to mean he was incredibly powerful. Even far past his prime, and in terrible health, he still had the power to tilt the seas, and even destroy islands, meaning that in his prime, he was even stronger, with a supreme grade blade, one of the strongest devil fruits ever, and every form of haki. Whitebeard in his prime was no joke. After Roger's death, Whitebeard sat at the top of the pirate world uncontested until his health started to decline, and even in his declining health, he was still able to fight on par with Navy admirals. Even the weaker members of the Rox pirates eventually became monsters. Kaido was not the same world's strongest creature that we know and love during Rox's era, but after the God Valley incident, where he got his devil fruit, we know just how strong he eventually became, and he was building up his strength during Roger's era, after the disbanding of the Rox pirates. Now we don't know exactly how strong Kaido was after Rox's death, but we do know roughly how strong Kaido was after Roger's death. We all remember Kaido's fight with Odin, and although it looks like Kaido was about to lose, losing to Odin is not a bad look. Odin in his prime was easily one of the strongest characters of his time, and he was a freak of nature in his own right. Traveling alongside 2 of the most powerful pirates to ever sail the seas, I could honestly make an entire section talking about Odin. But I think most people still watching this video understand just how much of a freak Odin was. Odin was a monster, and Kaido losing to him would not have been a bad look. Even looking at Big Mom, Roger in his prime did not want to fight against her. Even though we know he would win, Roger chose to sneak into Big Mom's territory instead of having an all-out fight with her. He would not do this if she was a pushover. Even Shiki was a beast. He was essentially the number 3 of the Rox pirates. And if you watched One Piece film Strong World, which you should absolutely do because it is amazing, you would have seen Shiki's power in action. He was able to create his own floating archipelago, making multiple islands float at the same time, making what Kaido did to Onigashima look like a joke. He was also one of Roger's greatest rivals, and almost defeated Roger.
Stop the cap!
If his fleet was not destroyed by a random storm, and he was even the first person to ever escape Impel Down. Then we look at the hero of the Marines, Monkey D. Garp, a man who Roger, by his own admission, had multiple life and death battles against. Garp to this day is still the only top tier fighter in One Piece who does not have a sword or a devil fruit, only fighting using his haki and his fists. He was one of the few men who could contest Roger in his prime. Even well past his prime, he could still casually walk into an emperor's territory and slap around everyone on the island. The only real challenge Garp faced was Kuzan, who isn't really a Blackbeard pirate at heart. Garp's punches alone look like a nuke going off, and his speed is still insane at the age of 78. While we are on the topic of the Marines, Sengoku is very likely equal to Garp, or maybe even stronger than Garp, if that's possible. You could argue that Garp is the strongest Marine, but since he did not want to work under the Celestial Dragons, Sengoku took the position of Fleet Admiral. But Sengoku's strength is also not to be questioned. He has every form of Haki and a mythical Zoan Devil Fruit. Sengoku's strength was even verified by the Pirate King himself, when Roger mentioned that if the Marines wanted to capture him, they would need to send Garp or Sengoku. Now we have to talk about the main man himself. Rox Davy D. Zebek. What can we say about Zebek that has not been said already? This man is an absolute unit in terms of combat strength. Before Roger's era began, it was clear who was the strongest pirate in the world. He had every form of Haki and swordsmanship that was unmatched, only further upscaling my goat. He commanded pirates, who later ruled the seas on their own after his death. Whitebeard, the future world's strongest man, Kaido, the future world's strongest creature, Big Mom, the strongest woman on the seas, the Golden Lion Shiki, and other legendary pirates. He did the unthinkable and broke into Imu's chambers, a feat which has yet to be replicated. He destroyed the gates of justice. He was the first and so far only character to permanently put down a Navy admiral. He was also a member of the legendary Davy clan, and also the father of the most devious pirate, Marshall D. Teach. Rox was such a threat to the world's government that he was erased from history, and a large reason why he was erased comes back to his sheer strength. Yes, he was a member of the Davy clan, but without his strength, Rox would not be able to impact the world in the ways that he did. He would not be able to command some of the most powerful pirates without his immense strength, or leave a legacy that is still being felt in the present day. Had Rox survived the God Valley incident, we would have a very different One Piece story. And lastly, we have Rox's former friend, Harold, the King of Elbaf. Now Harold is far from an ordinary giant. He is one of the few ancient giants we've seen in the series, and in his prime, he was impressively strong. Yes, he lost to Zebek, but after the last minute and a half I spent glazing Zebek, losing to one of the strongest pirates in history is not a bad look. Harold was able to go toe-to-toe against Zebek when Zebek was holding back. Against most people in the world, King Harold would be an unstoppable force, and his strength is not to be questioned. So after all of that, you can see why I rank the golden era of piracy so highly. We have several characters who are at the Pirate King level, even surpassing the level of the Yonko. We have several characters who could comfortably fall into the Emperor territory. Pirates of this era have shaped the next two generations after them, still affecting the world to this day. I would say they were the greatest generation, but there is another that I have intentionally left for the very end. Yes, that is correct. We have the Ancient Era, or you can call it the Void Century Era. We know some characters from this generation, namely Joy Boy, Imu, the Five Elders, Mayneth, and Zunisha, and slightly before this generation, the Sword God Ryuma. We also very likely have Davy himself in this generation. We can vouch for the strength of some of these characters. Joy Boy should be the most impressive character we've ever seen, as even sensing his Haki 800 years later still makes Imu shiver. And speaking of Imu was the quote-unquote god of the world, and should be terrifyingly powerful as well, seeing as though Imu was unfazed when Rox broke into their chamber. Considering Rox could not do much against Imu, we know that Imu is monstrously powerful. The Five Elders have immortality hacks, and they might even have devil fruits. They have impressive strength, and every form of Haki. Mayneth was a part of Joy Boy's crew, so that is something. And lastly, we have the god of the blade, Ryuma. Yes, Ryuma is before Joy Boy's time, but he is still one of the few characters whose impact is still being felt hundreds of years later, even long after his death. He is the distant ancestor to Zoro, who we all know and love, and he is one of the few characters to create a black blade. His strength is nothing short of legendary. This era is an honorable mention because we don't quite have all of the details, but this generation can easily be the strongest, and if you put them as number one for your list, I don't blame you, but for right now, they are an honorable mention. Now the golden era of One Piece is pretty stacked because it encompasses multiple decades, which helps them be the strongest generation. But let's say that we combine the first two generations that I talked about, the Great Pirate Era and the current generation. If you look at it from that perspective, then it is a lot less one-sided. So to simplify it, basically you would have characters that began their journey after Roger's death all the way up to the present day, versus characters that were active during Roger's time. At that point, it is less of a landslide, but I still think that the golden era of piracy would take the W, but that is just my opinion. What do you guys think? Do you agree with my rankings or not? And with the scenario that I just pitched, which side do you think would take the win? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. See you in the next one.